Hello again. As you may know, I have made a video re-reviewing Star Wars The Phantom Menace. And much to my surprise, a handful of people liked it. And a few others really liked it. So here's another one. We'll be talking about Star Wars Attack of the Clones, and its status as one of the most overhated, underappreciated, most despised, most reviled, and most disputed Star Wars film. Kaiser has paid me with a month's supply of Viagra to make this one, so I'll make this quick. Said every woman I've ever been with. Well, all the women I didn't lock away in my basement full of flesh-eating cockroaches. Star Wars Attack of the Clones is one of the best movies to ever have been made by a human. Why is it so good, you ask? Well, it'll take a little while to explain, because the answer involves everything in the movie, especially the women. But I can guarantee that a lot of people were looking at Star Wars The Phantom Menace and said, "Man, I hate children. But maybe this time we'll actually see some boobies in Star Wars." Well, it turns out, yes, it did in fact have boobies. But it also had an interesting story to boot. Because that's what most Star Wars fans want, right? Right? Goes to show you shouldn't trust the judgment of a group of fans with a chip on their shoulder. Or any so-called fan, for that matter. But don't worry, I promise this won't be some therapy session like I framed my initial review. You see, Mike Staclaza likes to over-exaggerate his dislike just a little bit, such as the way of any 2010s movie reviewer, to sell to the audience just how traumatized they are over a movie they hate.
Yeah, it's not misery porn.
Yeah.
There's movies like that out there, you know, like The Phantom Menace and
The Phantom Menace was just re-released in theaters.
I know.
Yeah.
That's the highest grossing movie of all time.
It apparently did pretty well for a re-release.
The highest grossing movie of all time. I saw an article.
Oh.
An article below that said that the average of human intelligence has dropped by 70%.
Oh my God.
Last year, so I don't know, it's an unrelated article.
Almost everything in this movie is right. Almost. If you stand back and look at the film as a whole, even the most ardent hater could at least tell that the film was made by a person who loves the story he's making. Unlike some people. It should be obvious why the prequels were made. To flesh out the backstory of one of the most iconic villains in cinema. Because not every monster is born a monster, contrary to what others may want. While a certain corporation clearly made all their assembly line crap to make merchandise to extort from their cult of shills. Like in the previous movie, we have a group of main characters, though this time the group is a bit smaller, consisting of Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme. Anakin and Obi-Wan's part in the story become a bit larger as the story explores Anakin and his recklessness, focusing on getting more control over the uncontrollable, and living up to the prophecy of the Chosen One.
I don't want things to change.
But you can't stop the change, any more than you can stop the suns from setting.
He is the Chosen One. He will bring balance.
Remember, Obi-Wan, if the prophecy is true, your apprentice is the only one who can bring the Force back into balance.
Sometimes there are things no one can fix. You're not all powerful.
Well, I should be. Someday I will be. I will be the most powerful Jedi ever. I promise you. I will even learn to stop people from dying.
He could use the Force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life.
I won't lose you the way I lost my mother. I am becoming more powerful than any Jedi has ever dreamed of. And I'm doing it for you. To protect you.
You were the Chosen One! It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them! Bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness!
And all that shit was happening while Palpatine was taking control of the Galactic Senate. Speaking of the Galactic Senate, Giga Chad Jar Jar makes a return. And his role in the story is very important too, but I want to address something that a lot of people really don't get. In rare instances, if a senator is summoned to Washington to vote on something minuscule but can't attend, another member of the cabinet can possibly place a vote for them. But that has always been a bit iffy. And in this case, because Padme is in danger of a third assassination attempt on the planet, she requests Jar Jar to take her place during the Senate proceedings.
I'm taking an extended leave of absence. It will be your responsibility to take my place in the Senate. Representative Binks, I know I can count on you.
George then made the voting question something a lot more important than someone sending you like $500 in fucking COVID stimulus money or whatever. The vote would be for whether Chancellor Palpatine would be given more executive power, so he can declare a war on the Separatists, currently having their own galactic Boston Tea Party or some shit. The movie begins with Padme Amidala, now a senator, being targeted by an assassin as she reaches the planet Coruscant. However, Padme's decoy was killed in the assassination attempt. Padme is taken away from the scene, looking rather traumatized that her own bodyguard died in her place. Afterwards, the Jedi Council and Palpatine try to assess the rising tension between the conflicting planetary systems and how the Separatists are gaining more support, rebelling against the Republic. Count Dooku is mentioned in the story as being the main supporter of the Separatist movement, and talk about whether he tried to assassinate Padme. Mace Windu and the rest of the council remain confident that he didn't. Their reasoning is that he was a political idealist, and murder would be beneath him. And as you watch the scenes that he's in this movie, Revenge of the Sith, he still has a sense of honor that a Jedi would have had, even in doing malicious things under Sidious's instructions. For instance, he didn't outright kill the Jedi when he had a perfectly good chance to in Geonosis.
Surrender, and your lives will be spared.
We will not be hostages to be bartered, Dooku.
Then, I'm sorry, old friend.
Anyway, once assured that the Jedi would tighten up her security, Anakin and Obi-Wan watch over Padme and wait for the assailant to be revealed. Jango and Zam send a droid to kill Padme discreetly, but before the deed could be done, Anakin and Obi-Wan sense the danger and prevent the slug creatures from killing Padme. Obi-Wan and Anakin chase after the assassin, eventually finding and apprehending her, but before she can reveal who she worked for, she is disposed of by Jango, in a way that would purposefully lead Obi-Wan to him when he escapes from Coruscant. Padme tells Jar Jar to take her place in the upcoming Senate proceedings, while she and Anakin prepare to leave the planet, at the behest of the Jedi Council. Despite a few road bumps regarding the planet's whereabouts, Obi-Wan follows the breadcrumb trail over to Kamino, where Jango resides. The spark of romance starts between Anakin and Padme on Naboo, the two friends slowly becoming star-crossed lovers over time. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan discovers two things. Number 1, Jango has an unaltered clone, Boba Fett. And number 2, a grand clone army is being made for Jedi Masters Sifo Dyas. And to extend an olive branch, no, I don't think Sophi Dyas should have been mentioned, because he hadn't shown up and hadn't been mentioned in any of the prequels. He honestly should have been at least shown in The Phantom Menace. Regardless, Obi-Wan reports the findings to Yoda and Mace Windu, and is told to capture Jango. Obi-Wan and Jango fight, the situation getting awfully anime in some parts, but Jango manages to get away. Obi-Wan tosses a tracker onto the Slave One before it takes off, and yes, it is the Slave One. I don't fucking care what anyone in Lucasfilm's group of dildo reviewers has to say about it. Meanwhile, Anakin confesses his love to Padme and experiences a nightmarish premonition of his mother's death. In the morning, he resolves to go back to Tatooine to look for his mother, despite his orders to stay on Naboo. Anakin and Padme go to Tatooine to look for Anakin's mother, meeting Watto again while on the planet. Anakin intimidates him into giving him the location of his mother, only to find out from his extended family, the Larses, that she had been kidnapped by Tusken Raiders. Anakin goes to look for his mother, and when he finds her in a Tusken Raider camp, he sees that she had been beaten and tortured for a while, and things take a turn for the worst. Obi-Wan continues on the trail to find Jango Fett, succeeds, and gets into a dogfight with him, barely outsmarting the bounty hunter. After a while, Obi-Wan lands on the planet Geonosis, and continues his investigation of who's behind the attempted assassination of Padme. But the rabbit hole is known to go much deeper than the clones, as he finds Count Dooku in the Trade Federation, making a deal to create a more vast droid army to overwhelm the Jedi and properly secede from the Republic. Anakin goes back to the homestead, carrying the body of his deceased mother before they bury her. Anakin laments the loss of his mother and that he wasn't strong enough to save her. He's shocked and angered with himself for committing such a wholesale slaughter of the Tuskens. Padme tries to comfort him during his time of need. After burying Shmi, Anakin and Padme are approached by R2-D2, telling the two about an urgent message he's sending to both of them in the Jedi Council. The message shows Obi-Wan talking about his findings before he's approached and engaged by the droidekas. Anakin and Padme are told to stay on Tatooine, afterwards disobeying those orders to help rescue Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan is quickly captured and held prisoner by Count Dooku. He's told that the Galactic Senate was intruded by an evil Sith Lord, Darth Sidious. Obi-Wan calls bullshit and refuses Dooku's offer to join his side.
It may be difficult to secure your release.
I will take what Jedi we have left and go to Geonosis and help Obi-Wan.
Visit, I will, the cloners on Camino. And see this army they have created for the Republic.
Anakin and Padme arrive on Geonosis along with C-3PO and R2-D2. Life-threatening hijinks ensue. Anakin and Padme are captured, and before they're dragged out to die in the Colosseum, Padme admits her yearning love for Anakin. They have a tender moment following the admission that the two of them could very well die, and if they did, they should accept their love for each other. Anakin and Padme get chained to poles alongside Obi-Wan. The professional Jango Fett, the regal Count Dooku, and the sadistic Viceroy Gunray watch above. After resisting for some time, and getting surrounded by droidekas, many Jedi arrive in the arena to help them. A battle kicks off between the massive droid army and the Jedi. Jango gets involved in the skirmish, seeing as how things have gotten so out of hand. Soon he has a showdown with Mace Windu, but it's short-lived, as his equipment gets trashed, his hand gets sliced off, and he swiftly gets decapitated, leaving Boba Fett fatherless. Plus L, plus ratio, plus you fell off, plus you're an overrated Star Wars character. The Jedi, being grievously outnumbered, become surrounded, and are given a final chance to surrender by Dooku. They decline, to his dismay. As the Jedi prepare to fight to their last breath, Yoda arrives with a massive clone army, which quickly decimates the battalion of droids and evacuates the Jedi. Oh, but Plinkett, why did they suddenly work together with the clones afterwards? They were literally saved by the army. They weren't going to look a gift horse in the mouth, which was what Palpatine was banking on. Anyway, the Jedi move quickly to engage a larger group of droids in an effort to capture Count Dooku. Dooku and the others realized that the clones were too strong and numerous for the droids to handle, so the Trade Federation retreats, and Dooku opts to take the Geonosian blueprints for a new super weapon to Darth Sidious. As the clones engage the droids, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Padme, and company approach Dooku. Dooku's backup shoots the back of their ship, making Padme fall out. Anakin tries to save her, but Obi-Wan stops him, in an effort to try to capture Dooku and end what was going to be an imminent war. Obi-Wan and Anakin arrive at Dooku's hideout, right before their ship gets blown up, and they encounter him. Both are greatly outclassed and easily outmatched by the skilled swordsman. Yoda shows up shortly after, ready to throw down with the Sith. At the end of their duel, Yoda reveals to the audience that Dooku used to be Yoda's Padawan as they talk their shit. Dooku creates a chance to escape, making Yoda stay back to save Anakin and Obi-Wan from being crushed. Padme arrives on the scene just as Dooku leaves the planet. After a while, Dooku arrives back on Coruscant to greet his master, Darth Sidious. They both converse about Sidious's plan playing out as he hoped it would. The Clone Wars have begun, much to Yoda's dismay. Anakin and Padme have a private wedding on Naboo, willing to keep their feelings for each other a secret, for better or worse.
But I want to address something that a lot of people shows picture of.
What the hey, what the fuck are you doing here? This is my video, you jackass. Go somewhere else.
Look over there, boobs.
Oh. Great, now where was I?
Your pizza rolls are mine.
You son of a bitch! Get back here! At the time the movie came out, the romance was a big point of contention for a few reasons. One of them is because the OT fanboys thought the dialogue was too corny, and the other is that they thought it was one-dimensional and awkward. One thing I'll say is that just because the romance wasn't like Han and Leia's romance doesn't mean it's bad. And just because his romance dialogue was inspired by 1930s style of movie acting, that doesn't mean he doesn't know how to write dialogue. It means you don't understand it. Why don't you understand it? Well, it's for the same reason the actors on the Acolyte TV show don't know basic bitch information about the franchise they're acting in. Because they're ignorant, and they're proud of it.
People have been talking to me online about how Darth Vader is such a bad person. It's very clear, and it's very well established from those actions. But if you can't look and see that Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people, I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this.
Most romantic encounters in real life are awkward and corny. Combine that with the two lovers being a monk who has no social life outside of the Jedi Order, and a politician who has no social life outside of her political arena, you're not going to get the most picture-perfect romance. It's awkward, but it absolutely makes sense that it's awkward. There's one point in the film for which the romantic confession from Anakin went a little over the top. I could see the complaints about that particular scene being valid. However, there is another scene I will absolutely defend. The I don't like sand scene. In short, when Padme says this...
We used to come here for school retreat. We would swim to that island every day. I loved the water. We used to lie out on the sand and let the sun dry us. And try to guess the names of the birds singing.
She's talking about her childhood, how she grew up, what environment she was in. And when Anakin says this...
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Anakin's talking about his childhood. He's trying to relate to her. Awkwardly, but trying nonetheless. Which then transitions into...
Not like here. Here everything is soft and smooth.
See, what's happening here is that Anakin is trying his best to pick up a chick who is as socially awkward as he is, and he succeeds, but only because he's being genuine. He's being honest. Which is something Padme absolutely values, considering she's a politician. And politicians tend to be very dishonest. Kind of like these people. Regardless of the canon or non-canon nature of them, lightsabers still manage to make many others see the magic that Star Wars has to offer. Well, unless you're the Acolyte. After all, a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect than being at something like that. And here I thought this was supposed to be a kid's show. I guess Harvey's secretary took a page out of Pervy Santa's book. I criticized George for overusing lightsabers in Attack of the Clones, but that was only because Mike Staclaza paid me in cocaine that particular week. Which is why I mentioned it in my previous review. Kind of a weird segue, but whatever. My true view on the matter is simply that George using as many lightsabers as he did has absolutely no impact on the story whatsoever. Especially since in the previous review of Attack of the Clones, I admitted that knights carried swords with them. So by that logic, if we're going to go by that, Jedi Knights and Padawans, or the learners, the apprentices, should carry lightsabers as well. I mean, what else are they gonna fucking carry? A laser whip? Oh. Anyways, I was being nitpicky at the time, which is something you'll come to understand. But one complaint I perpetuated is that Yoda shouldn't have used the lightsaber in Attack of the Clones because it assassinated his character. This is untrue, and once again I'll explain why in the simplest of terms. Jedi use lightsabers to fight. Yoda is a Jedi. Therefore, because Yoda is a Jedi, he can use the lightsaber. Are we good with that explanation, Mike?
Oh, no.
Okay, but if you just... I also want to address that for some reason people say that because Yoda uses the lightsaber that it ruins any and all wisdom he has to offer in the original trilogy. I'm going to ask you one question. Why? Why does it ruin any kind of wisdom Yoda has? When he says war doesn't make one great, he's speaking from experience now, rather than saying some empty statement. When he says size matters not, what he's saying is that it doesn't matter what you think your limitations are. And that statement still holds true, even in the prequels, lightsaber or no lightsaber. So regardless of what you say about George not understanding his own creation, he understood it enough not to do shit like this.
Oh, they fly now! They fly now? They fly!
Watch Rick Worley. In my previous review, I essentially implied that George was only trying to outdo other artists in their movies that had been made before Attack of the Clones. Of course, this was before I got off my cocaine binge, so the actual truth here is that George was not blatantly ripping movies off, or trying to outdo anyone. As I ended up explaining in my re-review of The Phantom Menace, George paid homage to many other older films. But I have to ask, why is it that so many people confuse someone trying to pay homage to something for a show of hubris? I believe there are 3 theories that can help explain this. Number 1, cinematic illiteracy. Number 2, projection. Number 3, sexual deviancy. To help explain my first point, I want to ask you something. Why is it that Red Letter Media ended up referencing movies like Blade Runner and Gladiator as movies George was supposedly trying to outdo, instead of movies like Alphaville, Nosferatu, Fall of the Roman Empire, and Frankenstein? Well, it's for the same reason that they, and many others like them, pull up the example of the Mona Lisa every time they try to explain why the original trilogy shouldn't have been changed. Because they don't know about older and much more obscure media. They know what most of everyone else knows, because they are uninformed. Because they are cinematically illiterate. I mean, what else can you expect from people who think that an entire movie counts as an act in a 3-act story? And I just want to stress this, right? Breaking character, why the fuck do they think that one movie counts as one act? I mean, like, really? That's not even remotely how it works. You know, for a bunch of film school dropouts, I would expect you guys to actually be consistent with how fucking retarded you guys are, but, I mean, God. You find new ways to surprise me during this whole thing, and it's just, I mean, like, I'm even like, oh, God, it's just interesting. It's interesting to see, you know, how much bullshit you guys can spew to justify your hatred over a literal movie. To explain my second point, this is more so a bit of a schizo theory, as most of the kids today call it. But it essentially means that members of Red Letter Media have shown quite a bit of disproportionate anger, sarcasm, and malice towards movies they dislike. And like most pretentious pricks inhaling their own farts in place of oxygen, they often think they can make better films than those they dislike. For very basic and surface level reasons. And through all that thick-headedness, they end up harboring a sense of disgust towards those whom they have convinced themselves are undeserving of success. Because they can't accept the fact that a filmmaker they used to look up to has simply just made a movie they don't like to watch. To explain my third point, they were just gay, and they liked to diddle kids. It isn't often that I come across a movie that is so overhated that more often than not we see that people nitpick the absolute shit out of it in place of legitimate criticism. The true folly of internet movie critics is that more often than not they go to one of two extremes. One extreme is the hyper-focus and objectivity, and the other extreme is a lack of focus, period, when the true way to criticize a film is a mix of both objectivity and subjectivity. But I think a third extreme is when you have such an undercooked baseline understanding of filmmaking and how it works that you end up essentially being as uncharitable as possible, while also being as uninformed as possible. Sped letter media fit this criteria to a T, but perhaps people are starting to slowly realize just how uninformed these armchair critics are. Finally realizing that they're glorified Trekkies who are wildly inconsistent with their beliefs about Star Wars and filmmaking in general, and whose opinion on the franchise before and after the Disney purchase shouldn't count for squat.
Books are not technically canon. I was like, oh. I mean, there's people starving around the world.
They're hypocrites. They have always been hypocrites and always will be. But at least I keep my dignity. Whatever. But now that that's over, I need to feed the body to the cockroaches. Anakin and Padme go to Tatooine to look for Anakin's mother. Re-meeting Anakin goes back to his homestead, motherfucker! His anger for his master's ghost, motherfucker! Anakin and Padme are told on Tatooine to stay on Tatooine. Motherfucker. I hate this fucking script. Alright. Anakin and Padme are told to stay on Tatooine. The word, Unga bunga monkey man. He's told that the Galactic Senate was introduced. After a while, Dooku rat murmur. The Clone Wars had begun, much to Yoda's dismay. Much to his dismay. Regardless of the canon or non-canon nature of them, they still manage to... They often think they can make better films than those they dislike. For Barry, it's very basic.